I'm Victoria. This is Eve.
Yes, hi.
If you've never joined us before, we teach the Women Empowered program. She spearheads, wrote everything about the program. And through this program, we realized that there's a lot of things as women we have to endure in our lifetime. And we said, well, why don't we learn as much about it and share all of our experiences and ideas on how we can not just survive it, but thrive in it. And so when we thought about what about Women Empowered Wednesdays to share a lot about this Women Empowered program, we said, well, there's just so much more than just what's in this program. And if you are a Women Empowered fan or follower and understand, you already know the massive amounts of techniques and information that's available. And our only hope was for these Wednesdays to gather and talk more about things that may happen on or off the mat, in or out of the program, and in the reality that we all have to live in, which is this beautiful world that we can make better every day.
That's right. So Women Empowered is a self-defense program, but what we all recognize is that self-defense goes far beyond, physical techniques. And sometimes on the mat, we can only connect on those elements. But the truth is, some of the hardest self-defense that we're ever going to do in our lives is not necessarily against somebody else, but it's going to be against ourselves. And and dealing with the things that our mind tells us and what our body does, and it's a challenge. So we recognize that, and that's why we are incorporating some of these discussions to be more all-encompassing than just focusing on specific self-defense scenarios in the traditional sense.
And because we've identified that the majority of our understanding of the mental world of self-defense that happens is, from the anxiety to the triggers to the needs for like addiction that we use as coping mechanisms, we went, wow, what's one way we can really combat that in a way that's sustainable for us? And we're like, community and connection, we believe, is one of the key reasons that we are able to survive and thrive with all the things that happen in our life. And we stand hoping to create that now, and that's why we gather every Wednesday.
That's right. And now more than ever, it's harder to connect with our community, right? As many of us are still in quarantine. So this is an opportunity to create this opportunity to connect with our community via video and online.
So if nothing else from this interesting lockdown situation that came out of it, it was that we got to create Women Empowered Wednesdays live with you guys.
Love it.
So back to our anxiety talk. We want to first enter a bit of a disclaimer here because we want to make sure that we are very clear about our positions in what we speak about. We are not medical professionals. We do not have any degrees in therapy, psychology, or anything of that derivative. We are educated in self-defense and our understanding of our own life experiences that we go through, and I am triggered and anxious quite often. So when we are sharing this information today on triggers, we want you to know that this does not replace any supplemental support that you can get from a medical professional, and we are not prescribing any way to use this beyond our own life experiences as a suggestion.
Well said. All right, let's get into it. So again, we discussed anxiety last week and a lot of the tools that we can use to mitigate anxiety. But we felt that this week warranted an entirely different topic, which is addressing triggers. And we feel like that's important because one could experience anxiety and never actually experience an isolated trigger. Whereas somebody else could potentially experience triggers or an isolated event being a trigger and not necessarily identify as somebody with anxiety. So they are not one and the same. They are correlated in many ways.
Distant cousins who like to play together a lot.
Yeah, right? They're friends. But yeah, we're trying to keep them apart, and that's so we want to first basically identify what a trigger is, and
so a trigger for our understanding is an external stimulus, something that happens, a person, a place, a thing, something you smell, something you hear, something you touch, that triggers or summons an energetic memory or reliving of a traumatic event that happened to you either in your recent or distant past. That trigger can really create a reliving of a moment. Like imagine being dropped into a 3D movie and thinking you are in fact being attacked by that tiger you're dreaming about. That is as strong and as crazy as a trigger can be.
Right, and it creates an actual physiological response in the body.
Yeah.
And like you mentioned, essentially what our body is experiencing is, for whatever reason, the stimulus tells our body that we are back in that same situation that we may have experienced in the past, in that trauma situation,
Oof.
and that it is an actual real threat. So think about how your body would respond to a potential life-threatening threat right in front of you. What type of physiological things happen? One might be like dissociation, almost like an out-of-body experience, right? So where you almost feel like, I feel like I just left my body and I don't even know what just happened, right? So
Yeah.
dissociation could potentially be one. Other is just emotional responses, like crying or yelling, or kind of like outbursts of emotion that you're not even quite sure where they came from.
Yeah, I get rapid breathing. I'm like, I start to breathe rapidly, and even though everything on the outside looks calm, so my husband can never identify it, he's like, what's up, what's wrong? And I'm like, I am literally like breathing so hard inside, or the upward of the chest and the holding of the breath, or the want to just run. Many times triggering like might instigate that feeling of like, I just want to get out of here. I don't know why I need to run. And that's what we call the flee. And this is essentially the primitive idea of fight, flight, or freeze. And I'm a freezer and I'm a flight person. I'm rarely a fighter. Do you know which ones you are when you get triggered?
I would say I'm a fighter and a flighter.
Yeah.
Fighter and a flighter.
I'm a flight and a freeze. I'm like, what's happening right now?
Yeah.
And then I try to deconstruct it all, but it's hard. So these are just common responses.
And these are, again, physiological responses. If any life-threatening situation were to happen, this is what would happen to our body. Now, when our bodies are triggered, these same things happen. So understanding that there's an actual physical response. It's not just, oh, this thing happened and it made me upset. That can be one element of it, but when you recognize, like, this was maybe far more just a normal kind of like, oh, that thing made me angry because, of course, it made you angry because it makes total sense. Where instead it's like, why all of a sudden am I experiencing this overwhelming sense of emotion or fear, or like a memory, or bringing you can actually physically like be brought back to that moment where you can't see anything else around you except for what you believe to be experiencing as that trauma.
Yeah, I think it's really important to give yourself some compassion in this moment as well, because when you have been triggered, it's very likely that for many of you, you might have some guilt or some shame that comes up right after for your response. And your response, because it is physiological, it's almost like saying, hey, that's normal, it's okay. And people who might be around you who don't understand that this is a physiological response to something that's happened to you in your past might make you feel like you're overreacting. They might make you feel like you're out of sorts, like, whoa, so weird, like, what's wrong with you? And we're here to tell you there's nothing wrong with you. Again, not a clinical professional, but Victoria over in Los Angeles is telling you.
Certified. Victoria certified, nothing's wrong with you. Okay?
It's just to understand that, like, if this is a physiological response, then it doesn't matter what people around you feel like you're overreacting. You actually are having a real experience within yourself.
I would say the number one response to people who are triggered is they start apologizing. And this is somebody who has witnessed many people experience triggers, but their number one thing is afterwards they go, oh my God, they get embarrassed and they apologize afterwards, as if it was something within their control. And that's what we're going to recognize, that there's elements of this that are not in our control. However, there are tools that we can use
to
tame them. So that's what we're going to get into.
Cool. So what's the first way to begin taming what we understand as our triggers? And it's simply recognizing that you are triggered. Now that's difficult because if it's happening to you and you're so busy experiencing it, it's hard to step out, boom, and like be a watcher of what's happening and go, oh my gosh, this thing is happening to me. And that comes with practice, that comes with breath work, but recognizing that you are being triggered is the key to first switching the ability to be consumed by your trigger.
And it can be difficult to do because, as we know, what happens is basically we go back to what takes over in that moment is our animal brain, which are our reptilian brain, which is basically the the part of our brain that, again, will do a fight, flight, or freeze. There's not a lot of logic or reason that is going to be a part of this. So it's like hard to go, oh, I'm just going to talk myself through this when, again, all we're thinking is survive, survive, survive. It's a challenge. So that's why, we're going to kind of come up with these tools of how to get to that place where we can, where we can forgive ourselves, number one, and also be able to identify them. So number one, recognizing that when your body is experiencing some of these behaviors that we just talked about, right? Some of these physiological responses, just recognizing, okay, I'm being triggered. And then what? Right?
And what?
And then what? So then the next step is to basically regulate our nervous system.
Woo! That is such a heavy request.
Yeah.
When you're in the middle of a trigger. Let me just put that out there. We're not saying, oh, just do these easy steps.
Just calm down.
You're gonna be great.
The worst 2 words anyone could ever say to anyone. Or
oh my God, the best meme I saw is never in the history of all calming down has anyone ever calmed down by telling them to calm down.
Say it again.
Never. So
I think I need a poster of that.
we do, and I'm telling you this because we know I have been I was triggered last night and the night before, and this week. It's been a lot of it. This has been a triggering month for people, and we see you, we get you, and regulating your nervous system is not something that you just do. It's just a practice. Like anything you do, the more you practice it, the more you get in touch with your ability to do these techniques we will talk about in 1 minute, stay tuned. You will see that it can get better over time, but still, even with it getting better over time, please be graceful with yourself because there will be messy moments where you don't. There will be embarrassing, but not needing to be, but embarrassing moments sometimes where you're like, I just did not have it together right there. I triggered and I'm a mess, and being messy is part of the healing process.
It is.
So allow it.
That's right. So when we talk about these grounding techniques, or basically regulating your nervous system, this goes back to our discussion last week where we actually explored a lot of different ways. That was kind of more in terms of dealing with anxiety, but we talked about one specifically, which is grounding techniques. And this is the one that is most important when, again, not officially, but that we feel is one of the best tools, right? That we love this tool to be able to, when you are physiologically, experiencing something, and to be able to get our body to get back in touch with itself. And so it's called grounding. And the first part of that is breathing. Now everyone has different breathing techniques or tactics, or maybe you don't, and it's time to invest in some. But the simplest one that we can offer, that has been, again, like basically scientifically proven to basically calm somebody's heart rate and to bring them back down to this state of where they're not in this kind of overwhelmed state, is just breathing in deep. So 4 seconds in, hold for 4 seconds. And exhale for 4 seconds. Okay? And if you're somebody who gets overwhelmed by counting, don't count. Okay? Just inhale, hold it, and then exhale. Okay? And do that over and over. And the breathing should come from down here, right?
Allow your belly to expand.
abdomen.
You don't have to keep holding it in like I was taught as a young girl in order to suck in to always be cute. Let it out.
Let it out.
Let the belly forward.
Yes, let the breathing come from the belly. So breathing is one of the best things to do, and just say, okay, I need to breathe. And your body will start to respond to that breath, and it may support it in terms of regrounding. Now the next thing, which again we addressed a little bit last week, but is important to note, is that sometimes the dissociation that happens, right, or the thought that, again, we are under attack, and so there's some responses to our body that we haven't quite identified. Like maybe we lose feeling in our hands and feet. Or we start to feel faint, right? We start to feel like you might pass out or something like that. So it's literally being able to identify everything around you in your present moment and reconnecting to that. And that might literally be just you sitting on a surface that's supportive, right? Like a chair, and then actually thinking about the feelings of, okay, I can feel my fingers, they're touching the chair. I can feel my toes on the carpet. Okay, I can, I'm feeling my body connecting to this and like regrounding and reconnecting you to the earth, essentially, and to whatever surface is supporting you.
Yeah, your little animal brain does really well when it can like get back in touch with where it's at, and it'll really come back from this scary place by going, oh, I'm here. Okay, there's rocks, there's trees, there's a carpet. I'm safe. it needs to be reminded that it's safe again, and it's not where the mental movie took it. It's not in those movie scenes. And on a quick side note of movies, that's a really great way to look at it, is if you like flash a scene from a film and it's this scary scene, and then all of a sudden you're in Serenity again and you realize you're here. That's what people who are triggered feel sometimes. They get triggered into that movie and they take on the rush of emotions from that scene, and then they're thrown back into dinner with their family and they're like, what just happened? Why am I feeling these things, but I'm safe? So they have to walk them back through that those things aren't happening right now, and that's what the grounding techniques can do.
Right, and just to mention again that, like anything, there is a spectrum, right? So triggers can all happen on a spectrum, and some of them can feel down here for you, some of them can feel like the world is about to end, right? And so just because it might be down here does not mean it's not a trigger, right? And we should still identify them as such. And so they're not all going to have the same physiological responses. We're just kind of identifying, kind of the further end of the spectrum, like worst case scenario for many, and what that could potentially look like, so that we feel prepared and supported for that.
Yeah. So then what do we do once we've calmed ourselves? Well, once we found ourselves grounded and back kind of in our sorts, just like, okay, I'm here, I'm safe. Then we want to understand what is happening and why is it happening. And the first thing we have to do is identify the external stimulus. What happened externally? So I will share with you guys that in my history, before I married my husband, I was dating somebody who I found out was cheating on me for a huge length of time and in an indigestible way. And when I found this out, I had a very difficult time trusting again. And I was lucky to find Hidon, who was willing to be so completely transparent with anything that happens in his life. But I also came in letting him know I have a bag full of triggers and an understanding of life that is not going to be your normal, oh, it's so happy, it's so great, but I hope it's happy. I want it to be great, and I'll believe the best in you if you tell me, but please also prove it. So I came with a lot of triggers for me, and part of that understanding was that I had to figure out what was my external stimuli and what was my internal. And when I came to him, I said, oh my gosh, that thing that you did, that thing when you didn't call me back and you disappeared for an hour, it's a huge trigger for me. And I had to identify it and understand what about that reminds me of or relates to my actual past. And that is one way that we have to first, again, it's the next step. What is the external stimuli that's happening that's triggering a past event or that traumatic experience that's happened to me? Is it a smell? Is it that lemon soap that I keep buying that reminds me of that place that doesn't really make sense? Is it that friend who speaks in the way that itches the same way that ex-boyfriend of mine spoke? So this is an external stimulus that you just need to, again, identify. That's our first step here, is just identifying what that is.
And then we're going to go deeper. So once we can identify the external stimulus, then we have to find, and this is going to be really the meat of all of this, is the internal, right? The internal, or the root or cause. So you could maybe say, oh, I see that, when my husband does that, that makes me mad, or it makes me triggered, or, and that's an easy to say, he's causing this, or this is about this external thing, right? When the harder part is to go, all right, what is it inside of me, or what is it internally, or what is the root of this? And for you were able to identify this isn't about Hidon right now.
Not at all. When he would disappear for an hour, which he was doing something that I had even forgotten that he had told me he was going to do some stuff, and it just ran past time. I was triggered to the fact that my ex-boyfriend would disappear for hours at a time, and little did I know he had another family, or he had another situation happening, and I didn't know. So when that came to fruition and I understood it, I was like, oh my gosh, Hidon's doing this thing where he disappears for an hour. Does he have another family? And that's like the mind game that you can't always control, because your mind is trying to keep you safe. So when you've gone through a traumatic experience, your mind goes into a hyper-vigilant state to look for all signs and signals that will possibly be the undoing of your safety. And I'm thankful that my mind can do that. It's hyper-vigilant. I actually really appreciate it. But I also know that it makes mental movies that aren't necessarily based on truth. And if I can go, okay, where's the truth here? What's really happening? What is the cause in me? Oh, I don't like to be left for hours and not know where my partner is. That's a big thing for me because I don't like to be lied to. So I don't like to be lied to. Okay, I don't like to be lied to. That's the root cause. And my partner's not lying to me. And I can find this out how? By doing some more investigation. So that comes back to our next step, which is to identify the cause and correlation. And once I understand, oh my goodness, the external stimulus that this happened, connected with the root cause in my system, is creating a massive trigger effect. And here is where we have to figure out how can I do this cause and correlation with every trigger that happens. Sounds daunting, I know, but you don't have to do them all at once. You do them one by one when it's happening.
Yeah, and I would say that this is, I think, like these examples are helpful because you go, oh, I can totally see how this thing could be, correlated to that. But there also might be some that are so deep and that are really difficult to uncover. So that's why this step 4 and 5, which we're talking about as both identifying the internal root and cause and then creating the, cause and connection there, understanding that is where the most amount of internal work is going to be necessary because you may not know. You might go, I don't know why this happened. And it might take a lot of uncovering and a lot of deconstructing. And it might go back to something that you forgot even happened or that you don't really think about on a daily basis, but you go, oh wow, okay, as a child, I was left home for however, long hours every day, and I never knew when my parents were coming home. And so now when
She's talking about me again.
Okay, a lot of us, right?
Yeah.
So I get upset when my husband or my partner or my friend or whoever comes home later. But it might not be something where, not every day you're going, oh, I really wish my parents would have picked me up on time all those years. You might have forgotten that was something that affected you that deeply. So think about all the uncovering that has to happen in order you to even identify this. So we're not saying that it's necessarily an easy or something that's like, oh, that's so obvious. Now, some of the traumas are so clear, and you go, oh, I know exactly where this came from, right?
Yeah.
And then the harder part is recognizing now, okay, now that I understand that, and this is what created this connection.
Yeah,
right?
And some of the subtleties that she's talking about, again, like my mom was gone all the time and didn't come home until I don't know when she would come home. If you're living that in a certain situation, either with your roommates, with your partner, with your spouses, in any way, and they come home and you find yourself like chopping the celery just a little bit harder, and you're like, I don't know why, I'm just a little more angry when I'm chopping the celery. And they come home and like, hey, honey, you're like, hey. And you might not even realize you're triggered. It could be so subtle that you have this aura of botheredness that isn't an overt boom trigger, but it's a subtle trigger that is creating what I'll call subtle resentment to your partner because they're eliciting behavior that you had a hard time coping with or dealing with or processing when you were a young child. And that just reignites itself as adults. And again, if you don't feel like I'm not hugely triggered, me and my partner are doing great. These are just subtle things like, well, but why do I keep resenting him for coming home from work at the normal time every day and leaving me at home for 6 hours? That is something, again, these are just subtle. But so how can we really, after we figured out the external and the internal and the cause and correlation, go ahead, you can go. The cause and correlation, we can sit here and discuss the deconstruction of all this with our partners or people around us all day. But then there's a point. There's a point where we have to really step back and take the bird's eye view. And this comes into documentation. Documenting your experiences, both the external, the internal, and the correlation or connection between the root cause and what's happening in your life, will allow you to not only see progressive patterns, but it'll also help you document ways that you can change it. And changing it doesn't mean I'm going to change Hedon from never leaving for an hour beyond telling me. Change means, oh my goodness, when he does that, he can affirm that he's doing that, and I can affirm that I'm safe. I can look at that and say, oh, this is not the trauma that had happened before. This is a new experience, and I am safe right here. And we do that again by, I just journal. I journal what happened. I journal why it went down, what I can see, what really was his fault. And that might also mean having a conversation with him. Mm-hmm. Saying, hey, that thing that you did today, it triggered me. And hey, this is not about you. You didn't do anything wrong. but I'm feeling this and this and this. Can you clarify some things and confirm, in fact, that you were doing this, this, or that? And then I get all the clarity I need from him. I get all the clarity I need from internal me. And once I write it all down, I go, oh wow, that's the mental movie I was giving myself. But the facts might have felt differently. I'm safe. How can I possibly recognize, identify, and have a different response next time?
Mm-hmm. And I think looking at that documentation or documenting it for anyone, and journaling is a way for us to also kind of strategize moving forward. And once you can identify, okay, here's what happened. Here's the reasons that I can kind of pull from. Now what, really?
Yeah.
And that's you've already done a huge part of the work. If you've identified the internal root cause, I would say probably the hardest part is done, is over, right?
Yeah.
Because that is honestly some of the hardest, like, pulling up of, like, all right, now I see this connection here. But then you can look at a strategy moving forward. So for some people, at least in the short term or the meantime, it might mean controlling those external stimuli, right? Where you go, you know what, I need to do some work right now, and so while I'm doing this work, I'm going to avoid these external stimuli that I know brings on triggers. And again, that is not a long-term solution or one that might be sustainable for the rest of your life, but it definitely is one that is worth acknowledging and offering to yourself, because it's an important one. Because if you're doing work and then you're constantly getting re-triggered, you're not able to do the work that needs to be done. So that's really where you go, all right, so now that I've identified this external trigger, okay, I need to either, maybe it's a conversation with your husband and you say, look, I understand, I want you to feel like you could live your life without worrying about, me leaving you after,
or any emotional response, right?
Or me, having an emotional response to you just, oh, sorry, slipped the time and I got it, excited about this thing and I just kept doing whatever. Or if it's my husband, just working. And just keep working.
Work.
Yeah. But you can say, right now, I'm recognizing that when you do that, I am getting triggered. So maybe you are using the people around you to kind of help mitigate those external responses, right?
We call it creating a safe bubble to heal it.
Yeah.
So like, it's just saying, I don't want to control you forever, but I need to heal me now. Can you, for X amount of time, not do these six things, maybe 20, and again, maybe try one at a time. When you do that thing in the kitchen and it keeps like banging, it reminds me of when my dad used to hit me, and I can't hear that. So can you not do that banging thing in the kitchen? And for anyone else, you'd be like, that's so crazy. How could this stimulate that? It does. So asking it is a simple request. And again, our partners don't have to agree to say yes to this. But if you don't ask, you're not also giving yourself the opportunity to be heard yes and to be able to create that safe bubble.
That's right. And the other thing might be that you just have to eliminate that stimulus altogether. So you're like, okay, well, I guess, I won't be able to go over to my in-laws' house for a while, right? Until I figure out this reason why they are triggering things with my own parents or whatever that might be. So it might be that you have to, avoid that stimulus altogether while you're doing your healing. Again, not the longest term, not the long-term game, but definitely an important short-term game that you should allow yourself to, to do and not feel guilty about it, because it's an important part of you being able to do the work that you need to do.
Yeah, and now this next one is one of the hardest ones for a lot of us to do after we've documented and really understood, created our safe bubble, understood our external and internal stimuli, recognize our triggers, get the grounding techniques down, not necessarily in any of those orders, but however you feel like conjuring this up. And then at the very end you go, okay, I've done all the things. Now it's time to make amends. And what does making amends look like? It means forgiveness. It means asking for forgiveness. And it means going maybe to your partner and saying, hey, I'm sorry I keep blowing up at you for that thing that I do that reminds me that you were my ex. I know you're not my ex. I know that whenever you do those things, it's not you, it's my mental movie. And I'm so sorry that I'm putting that on you. And when you come in with this genuine, like, understanding that this person who's trying to love you is igniting something in you that doesn't have anything to do with them, it's really relinquishing for them. And the harder part, because for some that's the hard part. For me, saying sorry to people is very easy. I'm like, I'm sorry. I did that thing with the thing. My bad. But the harder part, and the one I'm really struggling with, is actually apologizing to myself.
Making amends with yourself, yeah.
It's really saying like, oh gosh, Victoria, like you did that thing, and you know what? I forgive you for not having control over your past traumas, for not being able to say that you're okay when you're really not okay, for not being able to put on a mask and act like you have it all together when you were a sloppy mess. Like sometimes we're just a sloppy mess. That's what triggers do. They bring you back to the point of confusion, and you're confusion, and that's also okay temporarily.
It is. So forgiveness for yourself, which I think is the hardest part for most people.
Girl, yeah.
It is not easy. And again, we've been told for so long how to act in certain ways and what's acceptable and what's not. And we often subscribe to those ourselves. So when we act in a way, or our body responds in a way that's not in alignment with that, we automatically feel guilt or shame.
Yeah.
And what we need to allow ourselves to do is to just feel and be okay with feeling and acting, and our bodies responding the way that they're going to, and then say, you know what, I have done the work, and I forgive myself, and guess what, this might happen again, and that's okay too. And then I'm going to do this whole process again, and every time it will become easier and easier because I'm learning a new skill. You're learning a new skill, which is how to manage these triggers when they come up. And it won't always get easier. There might be some times where you're like, oh, okay, I got that one under control. And then the next time might be way worse. And then you might do the next one and you're like, oh, I got this. And then nope, so it's not going to be this like beautiful linear progression of like, oh, I'm just nailing this. But, but it's probably the most important. You will not ever be able to move forward with really mitigating how triggers are a part of your life if you cannot make amends with yourself and with those around you.
And you know what's something cool? What my friend Olivia said in one of our groups, the Zoom sessions before, she heard about this technique where you like almost speak to yourself versus like, I forgive me. That's one way. But you can also understand that me is separate from you. So you can say, I forgive you, Victoria. And it's like, whoa, there's a power in saying your own name,
and actually saying it too.
Yeah.
Like not just thinking it like,
oh, crazier, go in front of a mirror.
Yes.
Look yourself in the eye and say, you, Victoria, I forgive you because life was hard for you for a while. And you know what? You didn't deserve all that, but you're doing the best you can now. And imagine if you can look yourself in the eye and say that, how maybe you've always wanted to really just hear that from someone. And because we can't guarantee that anyone around us can heal that for us, maybe you can heal that for yourself.
So beautiful.
Maybe.
Yeah. And
that comes to our last suggestion on my idea and her idea of how we can tame triggers is acceptance. And how good does it feel, first of all, just to be accepted for who we are, what we do, what happens within us, everything, the good, the bad, the yucky, the joy-filled, all these things that we feel. When you feel accepted for all that has happened, there is a healing and a calming sense of like, oh, okay, I can be all these things and still be loved and still be accepted. And that's our, like, also last step is accepting that triggers happen and you can be triggered, but you can also tame them with some practice. And even though you're triggered and still working on taming them, you can still live a life with people who will love you and hold you and bring you into their world and say, I got you. We got this together. You don't have to do this alone.
And that's why we're here to talk about this, right?
Yep.
Yeah, so acceptance. You are not broken. This is not something that needs to completely run your life. It will be a part of your life, but there are tools, and that's the most important thing. Just like with any challenge, with any challenge in our life, just to know, okay, I have the support, I have the community that can help me through this, and I've got tools, I've got techniques, I've got my jiu-jitsu, my trigger jiu-jitsu, whatever that is. Like here's my techniques, and guess what? These techniques, and there will be different ones for different people. So some will work better for others, and other people have different strategies. And again, a lot of the strategies that we talked about last week with the anxiety talk, may also be elements, like maybe movement for some people, and they just go, okay, I just got to start running, and they just got to start moving, or doing something to help manage that. So everyone's going to have different techniques and different coping strategies, but this kind of layout of just being able to look at them, identify them, and process them, and document that for yourself is such an important tool that we wanted to share with you.
Yeah. So just to summarize, in the steps of the process, again, it doesn't have to be in this order. You can omit things that either you want to bypass or that don't feel good for you at that time, or that you just forget, honestly, because life is day by day, moment by moment. But first, you're going to recognize the trigger, what's happening, how it's happening. Then you're going to regulate your nervous system so you can bring yourself down to a point in which you can function. Then you're going to identify the external stimuli, and then identify the internal stimuli, what's happening in you, and then figure out the connection between the two, the cause and connection between the external and the internal, and document it, and then write it out and say what's happening, just deconstruct it, strategize for possibly a different reaction another day, and then you will go, I can make amends with the people who were involved with that outburst, and most importantly, yourself. Mm-hmm. And then accept that this just happened, I have triggers, and I can and will do this again with grace and style, even if I'm messy, because messiness can be gracefulness. Mm-hmm. And you'll just go through this process maybe 15 times a day or 15 times a year, whatever it is experiencing for you. I think that it's all possible, and I say all this with a smiling face because I know that this process has been working for me. I know that this has been a healing tool to become a different relationship with triggers. I've been changing this for 13 years since my ex, but like 36 years in our history of life. And what I want to just touch on real quick before we finish the triggers moment for a second, is that trauma exists differently in everybody, but I don't think I know anyone exempt from trauma. And that could be for many, like, again, those acute moments, very distinct moments that something aggravating happened, life-changing, shifting, whether it was a physical assault, whether it was like an emotional jerk, or whether it was the opposite, which was a subtle interpretation of the situation. Mm-hmm. Like when you were 4 or 7 or 8 years old and you saw your parents fighting, and you didn't understand what the fight was about, but you internalized that as something wrong with you or your fault. And then you spend the next 20 years of your life thinking that you're the reason that your parents potentially got divorced. Trauma starts as something small and is an internalized brain understanding that just transforms itself within you. So I just want to invite you to think that you're not wrong because you have trauma, you're not broken, and maybe it was a misinterpretation, or maybe it was an accurate interpretation that was blown out of a small understanding to now an adult understanding. And maybe as an adult you can look back and help that younger child in you process and transform their idea of what could have happened to, okay, I am not there anymore, so I can be safe in these other ways. And life can be manufactured differently, and someone doesn't have to fight and leave me. They can fight and stay. And yeah.
Beautiful. I wanted to kind of continue that to make sure that this goes without saying that always seeking support from professionals is another super important tool with this. Yeah. And again, depending on, some people may feel like, you know what, these are things that I feel like I can manage myself and take on myself using these tools. But again, especially if you're stuck in trying to even identify what the internal root cause of this is, a big part of that will be going to therapy and having that person help you uncover those layers, and so that you can identify this, because like you said, no one is exempt from trauma. You may know very well what your trauma is, or you may not. You might go, well, it's kind of a mix of a lot of things, but who knows which one is actually this one is connected to, you know? Yeah. So seeking support and help in terms of identifying that is so important. And our goal is always to reduce the stigma around seeking therapy or seeking help, because people, for many years it was like, oh, if you're seeking therapy, that means something's wrong with you. No, every single person. Yep, you. I'm talking to you.
And you.
And you.
And you.
And also you could benefit from therapy. So that kind of goes without saying. That's just something that we believe in, deeply. So it didn't necessarily become one of these steps, but these are things you could do with a therapist. These are things you could do on your own and then report back, and kind of like, again, if you have, anytime you get difficulty in terms of uncovering these things, that's when seeking that professional support can really come in and help you like remove those layers and like really strip it down to what it might be. And then once you have that, then you can kind of continue on with these tools. And then the other element to this is, depending on what a trigger might be for someone. So for us, we the reason why obviously we witness a lot of triggers is because we teach self-defense, and we recognize that a good portion of our students have likely experienced, just statistically, have likely experienced violence or trauma or abuse before. So we have witnessed women in our classes who become triggered by being put in the physical situation, right? They're being maybe perhaps triggered by touch or by feeling or sight or a number of things, where they are now feeling like they are back into that position where they may have been, again, experienced their trauma, and it might represent that for them. And so, being able to, for them, that trigger might happen. Now, what has been a beautiful thing that we have seen is that for some people, that might be the end of the road for them, and they go, oh my gosh, this trigger happened, and I have to stay 10 foot away. And again, there should be no shame or guilt about that, for recognizing, right now is not the time for me to go on the mat with somebody on top of me putting their hands on my neck. I'm not there yet, right? That is totally okay. There are also people who are at different kind of places in the healing process where they go, all right, this is something that is triggering me, clearly. And they have already identified everything that we talked about. Maybe they've documented it, maybe not, but they're fully aware of like, this in my brain equals that, and that's why I'm having this reaction. But there is a way to also to basically, do minimal exposure to this over time, and with support, right? And that's the key. You don't just throw yourself in there and go, okay, I'm gonna survive this tiger that's coming at me now. That's not the goal. The goal is to go, all right, how can I set myself up so that even though I know I may experience a trigger again, I'm actually putting myself in a situation where a trigger could potentially happen. How do I put myself in a position where I can be supported and I have the tools I need, both internally and maybe around me, to, if I get triggered again, to be able to, okay, all the things that we just talked about, right? To be able to have those. And then it might be, a different level of exposure next time, and a different. And what we have seen, and what's so beautiful about, both about jiu-jitsu or about anything that's transformative like this, is that we actually have seen people be able to transform their triggers and have it be something that, right away would cause a trigger, to them being able to kind of endure more exposure to that without experiencing that same trigger. So there are ways that they can be transformed and they can be mitigated. It's not always easy, and it does take work, but it's been so beautiful to see that process with some of our students.
And those possibilities. And I think it's a really important thing to say that we come from a place where we help other women and support them through their triggers. So a lot of people have asked us, how can we be this support for someone else? Because they're not, again, therapists or trained counselors who know how to do the processing that we happen to study, and we enjoy studying. So we do also want to touch a little bit on what if someone around you is being triggered or continually being triggered? How do you support someone? And our first and go-to for anyone, and this really means anyone in your life who's having a hard time, not even just triggered, it's the idea of holding space. Now,
so you mean not telling them to calm down?
Oh my gosh! Just heard those words.
I know.
Let's define what holding space might be for some people. Holding space, I like to look at it as creating a fake container that I don't put inside myself. So I'm not internalizing anything that's happening to you, but I'm putting it between us. It's called the space between. This container is an open and empty container that can run and hold anything as endlessly as you need until the person says, okay, I'm done. I need a minute. But holding space says this container can hold anything that you're gonna give me. I welcome it without judgment, without a want to fix it or change it or for me to get up and run. Holding space is literally the opening of a mutual bag that you will say, give me all the stuff that you need to unload, and I will secure it here. and I will put it to the side, and it can stay safe here. I won't tell anyone about it unless it's potentially you harming yourself, which then I think we all have a space where we have to go, I have to tell someone if you are thinking of suicide, thinking of these other things. But that space, that container, is a safe location to dump. And I want to say that this is just an assumption of my own. Most people I know don't feel like they have someone they can go to feel like space would really be held. They feel like they'll be judged. They feel like they will be fixed. They feel like they will be torn apart and deconstructed to something that they're not. Rarely can we look at someone and say, I welcome everything that you're bringing me right now. I might stand in some awe that you have survived that which you just endured. And I might even cry because what you've experienced moves me to a place of emotions. But please keep giving it to me. I can handle you. I can handle this. And if you can sit with someone and look at them and tell them these things, they will give more. And the more that they give you, the more they unload to you and that you put in that bag, the lighter they will be, and the more they can transform their relationship with themselves and their triggers. And holding space is a very nuanced human thing that we've really lost touch with, because most of us every day put on masks of who we think we need to be, of who we should be. I must be stronger to be for this person. I don't come to people holding space with my strong mask. I come with the masks all taken off and going, here's who I really am. Are you ready to be who you really are right now? Because I can handle it. And I'm willing to handle it. And then when I'm not, and then when I'm done, I gracefully say, I need a pause. All that you've given me is full right now. And I want to be able to hold more space for you, but I'm full. Can we take a minute? Can we reconvene? Can we come back at another time? This was so important to me, and everything you've given me is I just want to give it a hug. Can we pause? And that's what's hard, is people like to wrap things up in a button and a bow, put it in a box and say, okay, let's fix it now. Let's do something about this.
That is the, I would say, because Victoria could literally run a masterclass on holding space. She is the best at it than anyone I've ever seen, and has taught me many, many techniques and ways, and just like, wow, what a concept. But this is like, sometimes I forget because I've been around her for so long, and like now this just becomes a part of our normal interactions and how we communicate to each other. But it is so unique to be able to just hold space for somebody, say, I'll let you tell me anything you want to tell me, and I can hold that for you, and I won't try to fix you. That's the key, because all of us, with the best intentions, all of us have this desire to go, oh my gosh, I love this person. I want to help them. I want to fix them. I want to do something to make them feel better right now. And that's going to be the biggest challenge with somebody who you love, who's being triggered, right? Is you're going to want to fix.
Fight for. You're going to want to fix them or fight for them. And you can't fight for their triggers. Their triggers are literally a past movie. You can't go in and battle her 4-year-old self.
Correct. Yeah, you can't fight them for her. And you can't, it's not your job to fix them, right? So what are some things that you can say or do that is, indicative of holding space? So not necessarily like, oh, well, maybe you should do this, or maybe, instead of, again, it's not about what they should be doing or what, how you can fix them, but it is, well, again, let's talk to the masterclass lady right here. Listen, give us all your goods.
Listen,
right?
The first thing I do is it's a mirroring. I'm seeing this. So what
holding up the mirror.
Yeah, I'm seeing that you felt hurt or overwhelmed. I'm seeing that you felt lied to. I'm seeing this, and by saying I'm seeing you, they feel seen. And part of our life's existence on this earth is to be seen. And when someone says, wow, that experience must have felt like this, or I'm hearing that you experienced this and it felt this way, is that true? Is that accurate? Repeat the words that they're actually telling to you. Oh my gosh, you felt violated. Oh my God, you felt violated. And repeat them to them and make them see that you hear the words that they're saying to the magnitude that they're saying. And I felt overwhelmed. And again, using their verbiage and reflecting their tone. Stay with them on their tone without losing yourself in it. Again, we don't need two people who are like, oh my gosh, that's not what we're doing. You keep your strength of ground, but you feel their feels with them. That's the empathetic nature that hopefully can come out. And once that vulnerability turns on, they start to be vulnerable. And that's with the mirroring. I'm here with you, but I'm not falling into it with you. I'm strong-holding to something as your ground, and you can just keep giving it to me, keep giving it to me. So mirroring and then validating their experience. You know, you experienced that thing. That was real for you. That's, I think, part of the hardest part for people who are triggered, is that they almost have convinced themselves that that wasn't real, because how could I have experienced such a thing? And like, I feel yucky or bad about it, so I even want to dismiss it and pretend it didn't happen. And most people spend so long in their life pretending something didn't happen that they're convinced that that thing didn't happen, which means they're not letting themselves feel the feelings. And we do know the only way to heal feelings is to feel the feelings. So that if you can give them a place to feel by then telling them, I validate your experience was real, it happened, and that's okay. You're safe now, but they happened. How can we walk you through this? So it's kind of like, how can you hold someone's hand without falling into their emotional craze? And I call it a craze not in a bad way, but like that messiness, without becoming messy with them. Mirroring, validating, and then saying, what can I do for you now? How
And
can I
that
support you now?
is a great question, right? So if you want to be able to help them or figure out, how can I support this person? That is the actual best question, is how can I best support you?
Yeah.
So sometimes, and they may not always know the answer, but that is a way, instead of you assuming that you know what they need in that moment for support, you can ask them what they need for support. And they might know, they might not, and then you could even ask them, are you okay with me sitting next to you and just being with you for a moment?
Yeah, don't touch me yet.
Do you want some space? You know, so you can find out kind of based on their interactions, but not everyone is going to need the same thing, and so it's important to help somebody who we love and care about, who's experienced a trigger, make sure that they can handle it in the way that they need.
Yeah.
Right. The other thing, I was going to say, is that even before we can hold space for somebody, is you could also support them in grounding.
Yeah.
Right. So that is something that, it might be even a matter of safety that you need to do this. Like if somebody is like, again, like heart rate or breathing, or kind of, you can tell is hyperventilating or in a state of extreme stress, then you can step in and help them ground. And so that might be walking them through breathing, right? Supporting them in breathing with them and saying, here, how about we sit down on this surface, or maybe it's the ground, or it's against the wall, or it's on a chair, and you can walk them through the grounding process. So you can help them with breathing. You can ask them to identify, and feel their fingers, and ask them to look at what's around them and find something, and talk to them through that, so they can get back down to that present moment. And then that's when, it's a beautiful time. Once they've, again, regulated their system a little bit, then it's a beautiful place to hold space if that's what's needed.
I will say something that happens a lot with people, and I say this because it's happened to me many times, is I can feel other people's discomfort with holding space or being there for me, so much so that I can see them almost rushing for it to be over. And one of the really beautiful questions you can say, or prompts, if you will, is, what else? Tell me more. I can handle it. What else are you feeling? Is there anything else you want to share with me? Because I have all the time in the world. And letting someone know that you actually have no place to be, nowhere to go, and you're willing for me to dump more, because peeling off triggers and holding space is like onions. We'll give you the first layer to see how it lands with you. Then we'll give you a second layer, and maybe a third if you're lucky. But we don't usually go much farther than the third, unless you're willing and ready. And I for whatever reason, stay with someone until they go to the depth and the core, because I know, I'm like, tell me more. And what else? And then how did that make you feel? And how did that come into your life? And how is that transpiring for you?
And we say Victoria's superpower is like, she'll meet somebody and within 5 minutes they're telling her their life story and like crying to her all the time. And
I don't know.
And it's because she knows how to hold space and knows how to just be open and allow someone to, to dump. And she can handle it.
And it's because I've been the person dumping, and I know that there's 70 layers of personal grief to sadness to things that are to shame to guilt, the things I don't want to share with people around me. I don't. Of course I'm scared, but I know that if I share it, I can heal it. And if you can be there for someone and really let them know, I can handle all the yuckiness that you think I don't want to see. I won't judge it. My gosh, I got yuckiness too. And if you open that space for them, I think that there could be a really big window for transformation and for bonding and healing with somebody in this way.
Amazing. I would like to open up for some questions, and maybe even discuss a couple messages that we got this week that I wanted to share on this topic. Let's see if I can pull this up.
Alia, can you come grab these two phones? Thank you. I don't think that one's saved. Unfortunately, we'll have to redirect. No problem.
Okay. All right. So there was one story that somebody shared with us that I wanted to be able to share as well, because it's a beautiful example of how triggers can be transformed over time. And this also, it was kind of when we were going to talk about anxiety and triggers, she shared this with me. So she said, let's see, I wanted to share my experience. 2 years ago, I went out for drinks with a friend of mine whom I shared a birthday. She and I had a good time, but I got very drunk much sooner than I expected. I got separated from my friend at the club and found my way outside, where I sat on the curb and waited for her to come out looking for me. I ended up passing out, and 2 men attempted to take me to their car, but luckily the club bouncer saw everything and stopped them. I was taken to the hospital, where it was determined that my drink was drugged, likely by those men who were never investigated. Anxiety tore me to shreds for 2 years. I couldn't go anywhere without someone I trusted to protect me. I would break down and cry in malls or concerts. Anywhere full of people made me feel small and vulnerable. I got to the point where I could barely function outside of going to work and going home. Then one day, something told me to check out a privately owned gym by my house I had been overlooking. The most incredible and welcoming people greeted me and asked me to join the women's BJJ class that night. From that moment on, everything changed for me. I didn't just take their women's class. I did 3 to 5 mixed gender BJJ classes a week on top of the women's class, striking, fitness, kickboxing, everything I could do I did. I didn't even notice how much more confident I was. My boyfriend pointed it out to me. I was going out in public without crying and no longer felt like I had to look over my shoulder everywhere I went. BJJ set me free from my crippling anxiety. Gave me the confidence of knowing I am capable of defending myself. It gave me my life back.
Yeah, that kind of made me emotional to listen to a little bit, because I can really relate to the understanding that life experiences happen to us and we feel chained by the ideas and fear of what that was for us. And unchaining ourselves for a moment, we go out only to be reinforced in the external stimuli that, oh my gosh, it's possible again. And it chains us again. And to hear that this woman had the courage to then go explore, and again, for us it's jiu-jitsu, but for you it could be anything. It could be karate, it could be taekwondo, it could be yoga, it could be boxing, whatever it is, to explore that which can build your confidence, to re-engage with the world from a new light, and to build the confidence to step forth and say, I will step into fear and I will meet it halfway, and I will battle it down moment by moment until I'm free again from those chains that robbed her of feeling confident in a mall or in a concert. It's like the most incredible overcoming journey that I can hear and feel. This is why we enjoy our work. This is why we share what we do, because we've lived it ourselves, and because we get to share it with other women who are like, this is different, this is new, I feel different, I've transformed into somebody new. And the fact that her boyfriend noticed it before she did, woo, so beautiful.
So beautiful. Thank you for sharing. There was another message that came in. Any other questions, Alia? Cool. So she said, and these are just other examples of grounding techniques. You were talking about grounding techniques. I'm a survivor of childhood sexual abuse, so I'm very familiar with getting triggered. First, and maybe obviously, I have to realize that I am triggered in order to see that I need to ground myself, right? These are some of the techniques I use, and whether they work in that particular day sometimes depend on how strongly triggered I am. I have all these written down in a note on my phone. so I can pull it up and use them without having to think too much. So
Smart.
that's another good tool is wherever you're at, go, I need my tools. Where are they? I use all 5 senses to name what I see, smell, etc. So what do I smell? What do I see? What can I touch?
We talked about this
Okay.
last week as well.
Tapping techniques, which I'm not familiar with, but I know that there's a lot of information out there about that. Visualization, calling someone on the phone to say, hey, I'm triggered and I need help. Can you just start talking to me about anything at all? Or again, maybe calling somebody and saying, hey, or texting them or whatever and saying, can you hold some space for me? I just need to just talk about what's going on right now.
Yeah.
So one or the other. Some people feel better if it's like, hey, talk to me about something
Distract,
totally different.
distract.
Distract me. And then other people's just to know, I need somebody to be able to get this out with.
And those are usually 2 different points of a person's situation. When you need the distraction is almost when I think grounding is being requested versus needing to talk through it is now in processing. So
Good point,
both
yeah.
important, but again, knowing where you're at can help know what you need to ask for.
Great point, yeah. Getting up and physically moving my body, especially if I can do it outside or standing up and shaking out my arms and hands. So these are techniques that she shared with us. And again, just a reminder that there's no one way that's going to work for everyone. And if you guys have other techniques and you want to add them into the comments, we would appreciate those as well.
I love it. Thank you guys so much again for joining us and being open to the idea that we believe in therapy. We believe that triggers are real and that they happen to you out of your control. So we don't blame you or shame you for them. And I hope that if you are in an environment that does, that you can maybe remove yourself temporarily at least until you can find your grounding to say, actually, triggers are real. Here's the scientific evidence as to why. And then explain yourself. If you feel, if you even need to go there, you don't need to change anyone's belief system on triggers. Just find people who are your crew, support you through it.
And we'll hold space for you.
Yeah.
And we're also going to put a summary of this and create some notes on the Women Empowered Instagram so that you can refer back to these and maybe make your own notes or your own note in your phone and whatever tools you need, we are here for you as well. So anything else, any other questions about this topic, we're happy to share any information or other places that can support, other resources as well.
Yeah, and thank you guys again for tuning in today and hopefully every Wednesday. We are really grateful to be here, grateful to have your ear and to share into a community of women who are exploring our deepest, darkest, and most beautiful selves on a weekly basis.